Waiting for Godot, Samuel Beckett. Samuel Barclay Beckett, who was born in 1906 and who died in the year 1989, an Irish novelist, dramatist, and poet, was born on 13th April 1906 in Dublin. His father, William Frank Beckett, was in construction work, and his mother, Maria Jones Rowe, was a nurse. After his graduation from Trinity College, he went to Paris, where he met James Joyce and became a devoted student of him. In 1931, he undertook a long journey to Britain, France, and Germany. That journey helped him to find many of his characters in his literary works. In 1937, he settled in France, where he was stabbed by a pimp. In his hospital days, he met Suzanne and got her friendship. However, he could marry her only in 1961. Though Beckett had little talent for happiness in his childhood and a severe depression that kept him in bed until midday in his youth, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1969. Though he was recognized as a novelist and dramatist earlier, it was Waiting for Godot that won him international fame. However, Beckett always wanted to keep himself away from the madding crowd. That was why he even declined the Nobel Prize to avoid making a speech at the ceremonies. Furthermore, after the death of his wife in July 1989, he confined to a small room then and died in December 1989. Beckett's works are filled with allusions to other writers like Dante and James Joyce. His plays are not written along traditional line with conventional plot, time, and place responses. But they focus on essential elements of human conditions in dark, humorous ways. This style of writing has been named as the writings that belong to the theatre of the absurd by Martin Esslin. The concept absurd is associated with Albert Camus. Waiting for Godot focuses on human despair and the will to survive in a hopeless world that offers no help in understanding. Waiting for Godot, a tragic comedy in two acts, is a play about waiting. Two men are waiting for the third, who never appears. If he comes, they believe that they will be saved. Vladimir, Didi, and Estrogen, Gogo, are bowler hatted and shabbily suited tramps that meet each day by a solitary tree to wait for a man called Godot. Vladimir, an ineffective man of the world, Strogan, a marvelously incompetent one, are like Laurel and Hardy, the famous Hollywood comical characters. Nothing is known about them except that they sleep in ditches and that Estragon is beaten at night by violent gangs. When they are waiting for Godot to pass time, they talk, argue, and play games. Even they both decide to hang themselves at the bough of the tree. However, at the end, they change their decision and decide to wait and see what Godot will say. To them, life appears to be on hold until Godot appears. Thus, life is shown as a succession of attempts to pass the time. Midway through the first act, Pozo and Lucky appear on the stage. Lucky is harnessed by a rope around his neck and carries a large bag, a folding stool, a picnic basket, and a great coat. Pozo comes behind him, holding the other end of the rope with his loud voice and dominating manner. But he is not seemed to be a villain. He made Lucky do many things to entertain Vladimir and Strogan, like dancing and thinking. That's how Lucky performs a very long and unbroken speech. After the departure of Pozo and Lucky, a boy appears with a message to Vladimir. He says that Mr. Godot told him to tell Vladimir that he won't come that evening, but surely the next day. The boy tells Vladimir that he means the god of Godot. Vladimir asks him whether Mr. Godot beats him. The boy replies that he won't, but says that Mr. Godot beat his brother who minds the sheep. Thus, violence and humor, the two extremes of the absurd world, is presented in the play. In the second act, the same things are repeated. They are waiting in the same place, saying and doing similar things that they did the previous day. To pass time, Strogan becomes Poso and Vladimir becomes Lucky and play for some time. Then Pozo and Lucky appear. But they have totally been changed this time. Pozo has become blind and Lucky has become dumb. It is not actually the next day. Then the boy comes and says that Godot won't come that evening, but surely the next day, and asks Vladimir whether he has any message to Godot. Vladimir asks the boy to tell Godot that he saw Vladimir. After the departure of the boy, Looking at the tree, Estrogen says, "Why don't we hang ourselves?" Though they decided to use Estrogen's belt, it breaks when they try to test whether it is strong enough. However, they decide to bring a good bit of rope and hang themselves the next day unless Godot comes. Though they say that they should go, they do not move. Thus, the play tells the audience to get up and leave as there is nothing going to happen. Moreover, the play suggests that life has no meaning and it is full of suffering. Waiting for Godot is a comedy of absurdity. It is filled with nonsensical lines, wordplay, meaningless dialogues, and characters who abruptly shift emotions and forget everything, ranging from their own identities to what happened the previous day. All these contribute to an absurdist humor throughout the play. Vladimir and Strogan pleasantly talk about suicide. All these have a discomforting effect on the audience, who is helplessly not sure how to react to this absurd mixture of comedy and tragedy, seriousness and playfulness. The absurdity caused by the seeming mismatch between characters, tones, and the content of their speech can be seen as a reaction to a world emptied of meaning and significance. Characters in Waiting for Godot. Vladimir, who is one of the two main characters of the play, seems to be more responsible and mature. His hat represents mind, so he represents the conscious mind, the rational side of humanity. In French, his name has connotations with the word speak speak. He is addressed as Didi by Estrogan and as Mr. Albert by the boy. Estrogan, the second of the two main characters, seems to be weak, helpless, and always looking for Vladimir's protection. He is practical and physical. He is with good vocabulary. His name in French means tarragon, a herb used to make pickles and vinegar. He represents the unconscious mind. He is earthy as his boots symbolize with earth, body, and roots. Pozo and Lucky are the another pair in this play. Pozo's whip symbolizes power. He symbolizes the sadist. He has the cunning nature to get people with brains on a leash. In Italian, Pozzo means well. Pozzo treats his slave rather horribly. However, he becomes blind in the second act and does not remember his meeting of Vladimir and Strogan. Lucky is the next character represented as a slave to Pozzo. The leash on his neck symbolizes bondage, and Lucky is a symbol of man as a machine. His name is ironic. Lucky, the masochist, carries Pozzo's coat, bags, and stool. In the first act, he entertains Vladimir and Istrogan by dancing and thinking aloud. However, in the second act, he is found dumb. The next important character is the boy who acts as a messenger to Godot. He is the only contact between the tramps and Godot. Thus, he symbolizes a priest figure. He appears at the end of each act to inform Vladimir that Godot is going to come on the next day. Then Godot is the man for whom Vladimir and Estrogan are waiting. But Godot never appears. Though the name contains the idea of God, even Beckett was not sure of it when he was asked about it. The play has several archetypal forms and situations. The road is the archetype of journey and travel, whereas the tree is the archetype of life and promise. In this play, the active one, like Pozzo and Lucky, pass through, whereas the passive ones, like Vladimir and Strogan, get a message and decide to go on waiting. Thus, the main characters in Waiting for Godot yearn vaguely for existence, yet they insist on looking outside themselves for salvation. The world of absurd in Waiting for Godot. Waiting for Godot is an unusual and remarkable play written by Irish Nobel Prize winner Samuel Beckett in 1952. The miserable condition of life in the present, the constant effort to make it fruitful, and the failure to succeed in this is portrayed in Waiting for Godot. The entire plot centers on two protagonists, and they are waiting for the mysterious character named Godot. Why is he an important figure for the protagonist? Why doesn't he appear, and why they are waiting? All these questions are unknown and uncertain. The men's future, the travelers, the messenger, theme, and background history are all not revealed. Thus, the play opens without any details for the audience, and it continues with a lack of information. Even without reaching at a climax, the play ends at the same place where it started. The tree is the only object that exists in the middle of emptiness. The tree, which is an absurd element, also struggles to survive with the tramps. The tree may symbolize many possibilities such as death, survival, change, and life. The tree which has no leaves could be a representation of lifelessness and death, though it tries to survive in the harsh circumstances. Similarly, the tramps are not happy about the present condition of their lives, but they are not capable of changing their present circumstances for better ones instead of wasting time for Godot. Though they would like to die, they are unable to kill themselves because the will to live is stronger than the will to die in them. They hope that perhaps God will bring the happiness and prosperity into their lives. The tomorrow, which never arrives in reality, keeps the tramps alive with the hope of meeting Godot. A few leaves shows the reincarnation of life on the second day in Act 2. Even if it is so, the plot is captured in the sentence of Istrogan, who says, "Nothing happens, nobody comes, nobody goes. It's awful." Thus, Waiting for Godot focuses on human despair and the will to survive in a hopeless world that offers no help in understanding. Allusion. Allusion is a figure of speech that refers to a well-known story, event, person, object, or idea of historical, cultural, literary, or political significance in order to make a comparison in the reader's mind. It is brief and either explicit or indirect. The allusions of James Joyce, Ezra Pound, and T.S. Eliot are highly specialized, so the readers sometimes need the help of scholarly annotations. For example, he was a real Romeo with the ladies. Chocolate was her Achilles' heel. Ambiguity. Ambiguity occurs when something is open to more than one interpretation. It is actually a fault in style. It is actually a use of a vague or equivocal expression when what is wanted is precision and singleness of reference. Multiple meaning and plurisignation are alternative terms for this use of language. James Joyce and John Donne have excessively used this device in their writings. I read the book. If it is present, it can be said, I read the book. If it is past, it should be pronounced, I read the book. Similarly, another example, the bark was painful. Whether the bark of the tree or dog is not certain here. Foreigners are hunting dogs. Here, present continuous tense, they are hunting. But at the same time, if hunting is used as an adjective qualifying dogs, it has a totally different meaning. Black comedy. Black comedy or a black humor or a gallows humor is a comic style that deals with the subjects that are normally considered serious or painful to discuss. The comedians often use it as a tool for exploring vulgar issues, thus providing discomfort and serious thought as well as amusement in their audience. Death, violence, discrimination, disease, and sexuality are the popular themes for this type. The critics have associated black comedy even with the ancient Greek poet Aristophanes. It was Breton who coined the black humor. He considered Jonathan Swift as its originator in English literature, where he used comedy to mock the victim by trivializing the sufferings of them. Oscar Wilde, who was in his deathbed in a cheap boarding house, once said, "Either that wallpaper goes or I do." It is actually a remember worthy and touching example for gallows humor.